Welcome to the Breakpoint Show, the podcast dedicated to analyzing the tennis Netflix Docu-Series Breakpoint episode by episode. I'm Gill Gross with Alex Gruskin, as always, where we are on to Season 2, Episode 3. Did I forget to write down the title? I did. Gruskin, friend or foe? Friend or foe?
I thought you were going to ask me that question as we start this podcast. Am I friend or foe as we enter today's show? I am friend of this episode. I thought this was delightful, and you alluded to this before we started recording. I'm going to quote my dear friend Ben Rothenberg, don't say something good until that red dot is on. This was my Super Bowl. Like, as a fan of American men's tennis in particular growing up, as someone who read every piece from Colette Lewis, as these guys in particular, Frances Tiafoe, Taylor Fritz, Tommy Paul, all emerged from the junior tennis world, to get to hear them discuss that journey, see how they frame that journey in the perspective of what they're trying to accomplish right now. It was fascinating. It was the most tennis-centric episode probably we've gotten thus far in the series, and maybe that's where you want to start, because not only did we get to see points constructed, we got to hear analysis of tennis. It was a delight. I really enjoyed this episode. I'm a friend of Season 2, Episode 3.
I knew you would be. And I also, I appreciated aspects of it. I also thought that as far as memorable moments are concerned, as far as behind the scenes access is concerned, or a storyline as impactful as kind of what we saw with Sabalenka in episode 1 and stuff, I thought it was behind in those categories. But also, I appreciate that not every single episode of this series can be a home run. And I kind of like how, like, if this is the average, if this is your kind of run-of-the-mill Breakpoint episode, I think that's a good thing, because I think it moved along well. We have 3 American men that this focused on: Frances Tiafoe, Tommy Paul, Taylor Fritz. I think all of them are different. Thought they did a good job of kind of contrasting not just their paths and their tennis careers, but also their personalities. And I think because the focus was on all 3 of them, it kind of bounced around a lot. The episode never stagnated. It always kind of continued to move along. And I guess the tennis piece of it, more than anything, was Fritz defending at Indian Wells, Tiafoe making the Indian Wells semifinal, and Tommy Paul was in there, but and then Tommy Paul's Australian Open semifinal run. So those were kind of the pillars as far as results are concerned. But I'm glad that they did these 3 together all in one episode. I think it's compelling, just the fact that all 3 of them came up together. They're doing things in American tennis that are a lot better than kind of what we saw post-Roddick era. Let me ask you this.
Well,
which of the 3?
Oh, just I want to comment on that, because people who comment accuse me of disagreeing with you unnecessarily. I actually don't think it's the disagreements that frustrates them. It's when I interrupt you that frustrates them. Trust me, no one criticizes me better than me. And I admit that is one of my flaws. But I do want to say you framed that in a fantastic way. This wasn't we're going for a home run episode. This is this is a double, but you're going to enjoy all 40 minutes of this one. And you're absolutely right. They nailed this as a double. This felt like an episode you could rewatch and feel pretty good running through, even if you might miss, a minute or 2 because you're doing something else. But you'll pop your head up and you'll get something entertaining at every moment of this one. I would also point out to your framing where I want to emphasize that I agree with you here. This was very much here's a 2023 storyline to throw for you tennis fans out there. And people in the know in particular will know Rise of American Men's Tennis was a real thing last year. And you got a hint of Ben Shelton. You didn't get any Sebi Korda stuff, but maybe they'll allude to that in later episodes. You did get the run of the big 3, Tiafoe, Fritz, and Tommy, who through that first third of the season all had top 10 moments of tennis. And it was interesting to see, rather than focus on an event, which was something they did more of in Season 1, this was one of your 2023 storylines, and we're going to present it through the framework of these 3 headline guys. And I thought it was really well done.
Exactly. Like, it kept your attention, even though if I were to try to pick out a viral moment, or if I were to tell Jenna, my girlfriend, the episode was about this, and this is why it made you feel this way, it would be harder to do it for this episode. And I feel like there were less
Yeah.
moments, but we can go through those moments.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this though: of the three, who do you think came across as the most compelling? Frances, Taylor, or Tommy?
I thought you were going to ask you, Amy, or Joel. And I was like, oh, that's an easy one. Um, I mean, it's impossible to not say Francis. I think that's the easy answer here, but I think the winner of the episode is Tommy. Like Tommy's the guy you want to hang out with. It's the guy who you see drinking a beer and you're like, "Oh, it'd be nice to go fishing with Tommy on his boat for an afternoon." Like that seems like a good time with friends. And even to hear him ask who's his coach? I'm blanking on his coach. Is it
Brad
Greg
Stein.
Boyden? Brad Stein,
Brad Stein.
thank you. To hear him, they're the same person, aren't they?
They are.
Yeah, to hear him, Brad Stein, I found a nice spot to grab a couple drinks, and Tom's like, "Did you get fucked up?" Like you're just kind of like, "Oh, I like where your brain's at, Tommy." And of course, his girlfriend right away is like, "Well, he hasn't had anything to drink this whole tournament, and even, again, Brad Stein's like, not even beer," and Tommy's like, "Nope, not even beer." And it sounds like it was a major milestone for Tommy, and obviously they get into that with more depth throughout the course of the episode. But Tommy's the dynamic character who we also hadn't learned about yet in this series, and a guy who they kind of unpack in a way who maybe we haven't seen done more broadly. If you're in the know and you follow Tommy's whole career, you might know some of these details, but it was nice to see his kind of why is he aloof in the way that he is, that goofiness, where does it come from? It was nice to see that unpacked. So I think of the three, he's got to be the biggest winner because Foe's a little more mainstream at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's spot on. I mean, Tommy, quiet guy, shy guy. I think there are a lot of tennis fans out there who might be like, so what's this guy like? What's his thing? Kind of has like a frat bro look and a frat bro name. So maybe that's his thing. And it's like, well, yeah, kind of, but also there's an evolution and a maturation process that he's undergone. And I think for most tennis fans, I think you're right that they probably will have learned the most about Tommy Paul because Taylor and Frances have gotten a little bit more spotlight and shine. Even Tommy, like there's a difference between making the US Open semis, which Frances did, and the Australian Open semis. As far as how that plays stateside, I'll say there's a difference there. So let's go through the Tommy stuff. I mean, Taylor introduces him as basically saying he's the guy growing up who didn't have to work very hard and it didn't matter because he was just that talented. He was that gifted. And then we go to Tommy and he's kind of saying like, when I turned pro, I was kind of in my party phase. And then there's the drunk doubles match at the US Open, which was your anecdote, which is something that I did not know about. Did you know about this?
No, I wasn't aware of this. I would also point out Tommy offers us the quote maybe of the episode when he's talking about his maturation process, how easy it was for him in the juniors. Again, junior French Open champion. That same year, junior US Open finalist was a guy competing for the biggest titles at the US junior level as well. And he's talking about transitioning to the pros, and he just offers us this gem. He goes, and first rounds are like tough. And just like that's Tommy Paul in a nutshell. He didn't realize first rounds are gonna be really hard when you're playing the 50 best players in the world and kind of adjusting to that reality of, oh, I got to bring it not just every event, but I got to bring it every match. I got to bring it every point. That level of focus has to be there. And you're absolutely right to see, because it starts off with such a healthy framing. You see Tommy with his friends on a boat, enjoying a beer, going fishing, and you're like, oh, this is a guy who can enjoy himself off the court. He talks about his diet. But again, that whole scene was framed in the context of it felt moderated. Like it felt like everything was in control. This was just a good afternoon with friends. And you can see the direct maturation, that opening scene from then later on when they discuss some of the struggles he used to have. And, that kind of relates directly to him getting that under control. It's kind of how he's gotten his results under control. And now he's got this Australian Open semifinal run and he's able to fly his mom down, all these different things. We're getting business class if we win. Like just it was every degree of winning for Tommy Paul that you see like, oh, okay, that's why where he is now. This kid was clearly incredibly gifted, didn't have his shit together, brought in Brad Stein, shit is now together. Like it was a really tidy, to your point, it's a double. It's just a really tidy story of a young kid growing up and reaching his
Yeah.
potential.
Not the most novel idea, not the most novel story. I think a lot of
Sure.
pros go through that. I would have liked a little more detail about what the sacrifices truly are. I just thought there was a little bit, it felt a little bit corner cutty where it's just the doubles match. That was good. I didn't know that. And that did paint very well, like how bad it was. Oh, like, yeah, it's not singles. Yeah, you know, he probably didn't care much about doubles to begin with, but still to go out drinking in a way where you're not really going to be in a place where you've recovered from your night out when it's time to play on court 11 at the US Open. That paints a good picture of how bad it was. Would I have liked a little bit more than then I started taking things more seriously and boom, it's like, give me details. And by the way, also, I know it took a while. That US Open doubles match was what, 2019-ish?
17.
17. Okay. So I don't know that Tommy actually got to a place where he was, I guess, making the best of his potential until the end of 2021. So just to comment, I could have used a little more there.
100%. And I'm glad, though, they did opening up about what is clearly an embarrassing incident for Tommy. And look, even his mom spoke openly about the fact that she was worried about his future, that he needed to get his act together. And he would call her worried as well, just to amplify everything. And again, for Tommy to share that side, that's a side you might have been superficially aware of, but even then you saw how talented he was. Athleticism has never been something he's lacked. He's always been in good enough shape. Obviously, we've seen him grow into elite shape and how that's helped his tennis. He's now a top 15 player in the world. But yeah, they opened up that side of things. I don't mean to make light of it. Have you ever played hungover tennis?
Probably.
Oh,
I mean, it's not as if it's like in my memory as like, oh, that time when,
I have one specific time, senior year, regional final. The night before was our last regionals as seniors, and a lot of the players, Marquette, Wisconsin, Northwestern, whatever, I just got to know over the years. So they're like, hey, we're going out. And I was like, well, we kind of got the regional final tomorrow. I like to win. I like you guys, but I really like winning more. They're like, no, we're going out. So I did. There's an overhead I hit where it was ringing, where I looked up in the light and I was like, please make contact with the ball because all I see is shine. Like I don't see a yellow anything. And the idea of playing through that at the US Open, like I could see how that could be that sort of moment for Tommy where it's kind of, hey, I need to get my act together. Like this is because it's one thing, again, it's a club tennis regional final. Who cares? It's the US Open. Like that is the stage of stages. And so I'm glad you brought up that specific scene because in this episode, that's probably the most powerful detail that stands out.
Yeah. And by the way, it's also probably a little more common than maybe people think. Would you agree with that statement?
I was not the most hungover person on the court that day.
No,
But in pro tennis, Kyrgios talked about it last season. Like, yes, these players go out. It's also for a lot of them, you might even go out and you might not play till 6 or 7 p.m. And it's a Friday night going into a Saturday, and you're a 24-year-old in a town you're never going to be in otherwise. Like, I'm not going to say names, but I have been out while at events, and I have seen players out at those same places that I am at. And so, yeah, absolutely. Players go out. They're still humans.
Yep. The emotional side of things also with Tommy's mom flying all the way to Australia, coming straight from work. You could feel the pride in her voice and her statement. So I thought that did tug on the heartstrings a little bit, probably more than anything else in this episode. So glad we started with Tommy. Let's go to Frances. Frances and Taylor were both covered in season 1. So now these are characters that viewers of Breakpoint season 1 will have been familiar with. In the case of Frances, I guess we get the aftermath after the US Open semifinal where his girlfriend, Ariane Broomfield, talks about all the brand deals Frances has had. The fact that you have Steph Curry. Here's a good detail from the episode. Steph Curry was like, bro, I was looking at your results. Like, why'd you lose first round in Vienna, man? What was that?
Yeah, no, I think you have to talk about these two together, Francis and Taylor, in this episode because this was very much a follow-up on season one's episodes regarding these two players. This was the first, dare I say, follow-up or succession episode where it's like, hey, if you saw season one, you saw last year these players made these significant breakthroughs. And the framing for both of them is, okay, now what? What are you going to do with that? And you're absolutely right. It was a fantastic humble brag that turned into an even better story of like, well, I was talking to Steph Curry and he was kind of like, yo, like, are you sure you're as good as you could be? Because you should be better than you are. And that's just an amazing thing. Shout out to Steph, keeping him honest. You love to see that. If there's a viral moment, just to get back to something you mentioned earlier, it's Ariane Broomfield, who's a lovely human being, former
Yeah.
NCAA doubles champion herself, by the way. I've been fortunate enough to interview her. She is as lovely as her interviews are throughout the course of this episode when you get the chance to speak with her in person. Her and Morgan just dishing on Taylor and Francis at their breakfast. Like, isn't that a boyfriend's worst nightmare? Like, that might be my greatest fear in life is a situation like that where I'm like, oh no, like everything was just shared. And so that's the scene that goes viral, right? They're spilling the tea, as the kids say. And I liked that their journey was linked together. Like I liked that aspect. I'm curious if you saw that as well. It felt like these two, their story was shared in this episode.
Well, I mean, all of them to an extent. First of all, I thought it was cool that Francis and Ariane were like at their rented out house in Palm Springs for Indian Wells, and they were watching Fritz's match against Sinner, and legitimately like very engaged in the outcome, like very much rooting for Taylor, which I didn't think it was a given. Like I knew that they were friends. I know that when they're in front of the media, they're obviously going to be like, yes, go America. But to see kind of how invested they were, it kind of sheds light on their relationship. I thought that was cool. Yes,
100%.
yes, the little lunch that Morgan and Ariane had, yeah, that was great. I mean, it was funny. It was funny to see that, and they were kind of contrasting. They're like, Morgan. I like it when Morgan talks about Taylor. I
Oh,
think
it's
I think it's
amazing.
very funny almost every time.
All her in general dishing on the players. We got her Nori take. We got her Sinner take. Like I could listen by the Ariane Broomfield just straight up knows tennis. Like
Yeah,
listening to her be like, this level is ridiculous. You're like, oh yeah, I kind of remember the Fritz Sinner match being a really fun one. But yeah, Morgan calling Sinner cute and like defending the position. Like, no, you know he's cute. And like it was a great argument. She said it in the exact right tone. Like, he is a cute kid. Like, come on, it's adorable.
it's
And that's what she was
perfect.
trying to convey. Yeah, listening to her just again, Taylor. Yeah, she is an excellent addition. They're both really phenomenal characters in this episode.
Yeah, they are. They're important, and obviously Tommy's girlfriend is also involved. Her
Yeah.
name Paige Lorenz. So I did think it was funny that they've all been in like strong and long enough relationships where like they're all in the episode, the girlfriends.
It's also
Um,
kind of like they're older now. It's funny because this follows season two, episode two, right? Where it's Holger Runa. And who's with Holger Runa? Who's the strongest female character in his life? It's his mom, who's
Mom.
coming to his room and making the bed and doing all the things. And like, yeah, it was great to see Tommy with his mom and sharing that special moment. But he's got his girl, like they all got their girlfriends with him. They're all in the primes of their career. It's like, hey,
Yep.
you're in life now. It's time to be the best in life. And they're kind of, obviously to see their girlfriends hold them to that standard. It's why they're in the relationships I would imagine that they are. Like it was a fascinating dynamic. This
Yeah.
was a hey, these guys are trying to grow up now, and it's time to see how good we are. And that theme, if you are a tennis fan, was one of the themes of 2023. And it again, I just think season two has captured these themes of the season so much better than season number one, and it's been a delight to watch.
Yeah. Look at their coaches. Also, all
Yeah.
long-term coaching relationships. Mike Russell with Fritz, they're going on a while now. Brad Stein and Tommy going on a while. Frances Tiafoe and Wayne Ferreira. Wayne Ferreira, I adore. Like, I
Yeah.
just think this guy, if he coached me in life, I could accomplish anything. He's just like he's such a presence. And like, I really like how disciplined he is and in everything he says.
Great
Um,
quote from him after the Hatchinov loss. Where he's like, "You should be mad. We'll talk about it later. Like, be mad right now, and you should be, and we'll do the real talk later." It's just
yeah.
that's the right sort of guidance in that moment.
Yeah, the guy's just so sure of himself, and he's such a leader, in my opinion. Um, yeah, you're right. The maturation process of all three of them, I do think that the girlfriend aspect and the coach's aspect is a good indication of that. I also think going back to Morgan, I did want to bring up that scene in the kitchen when she's making bacon and eggs because
Oh,
she really knows how to do this Netflix thing. Like, maybe I'm wrong about this, but I have a feeling if there's no cameras in there, Morgan Riddle is not like, so like, let's talk about Cam Nori right now. And like,
yeah.
let's break down Nori Tiafoe. I just think she's so good at this. Like, Netflix, like, we need to give them what they want. So she's just like making bacon and eggs, and she's like, hey, Taylor, what do you think? How's Sinner playing this year? Like, I love it.
Well, if you were to describe Taylor Fritz in one meal, it would be bacon, eggs, hash browns as a breakfast. Like that's your standard cookie cutter breakfast. That's Taylor Fritz kind of in a personality sense. Like he's a very nice guy who will answer what you ask. He's extraordinarily polite, extraordinarily kind, but he's not going to be the outgoing extrovert that a
No.
Frances Tiafoe is. He's not going to give you as much natural just goof as you get from Tommy Paul, who if nothing else is so thoroughly himself. Like Taylor, you need to coax it out of a little bit. And Morgan does such a good, you're right. Like we got the full, like Francis plays Cam. That's kind of tough. And Fritz is like, yeah, it is tough. And you could tell he's always down to talk a little tennis, talk about the results. They get into like, yeah, I'm going to be the number 8 seed in the draw, but it depends how the draw breaks and all those different dynamics. You're right. She's an outstanding character.
You mentioned off air before we got on, you felt that there was more tennis in this one than the previous two with Runa and Sabalenka. There was other stuff in those, but that's how you mark the episodes. Uh, I took note of this at one point. I don't think this was an overarching takeaway that I had. I'm curious to hear what you think, but the Hachinov Tiafoe fourth set tiebreak at the Australian Open when Foe goes down 2-0, wins the third set. He's up 6-2 in this fourth set tiebreak and blows it. That to me was the first time where we got a real tennis storytelling segment. Is that kind of what you had in mind?
Even beyond that, they showed us a lot of the Popper and Fritz match. They showed us a lot of Tommy across the board, him playing Shelton, him playing RBA, obviously Indian Wells. We got some real Sinner Fritz action as well. Francis, I'm blanking on who he played in the quarterfinals, but his win in that quarterfinal match over Nori, excuse me. Also, like we got real stretches of points of tennis throughout the course of this match. You're right. They showed us the rhythm. They didn't show us all 6 points in the Hachinov comeback, but they showed us 4. 3 of them. They showed us Francis kind of dipping in energy. They had him talk through what happened in his mind down the home stretch of that match. And yeah, we went in depth into some of these tennis matches in ways that prior episodes just hadn't. And I enjoyed that aspect. I wonder if there's more room for it moving forward.
Yeah, some good mic'd up moments with the coaches as
Yep.
well. And also R.M. Broomfield when she said, I liked her kind of words of encouragement to Francis. Bring that swag, Francis. And then she kind of also gave a little synopsis of his mentality on court, and she was like, "It's Francis versus Francis." That was another really good one. Okay, there's one other thing that I want to talk about as a takeaway for this episode, but also I want to go to you. Anything that we didn't cover that was on your mind that you want to get to?
Yeah, a couple of things. One of them, just to follow up on that tennis note, we got a lot of good tennis, right? You got Tommy beating Ben Shelton. And again, I wish we would have gotten a little bit more Ben Shelton. I think we are going to
I think
later
we'll
in the
get it.
season. Yeah. But, you got him beating Ben. You didn't get him losing to Djokovic in the semifinals. You got Francis beating Cameron Norrie. You didn't get his outstanding match versus Alcaraz in the semifinal, a match that I thought was one of the more memorable ones of 2024. And, they really elected not to cover those. They kind of ended with the winning, which, by the way, is something we saw them do in season 2 as well. Episode 2, excuse me, as well, with Holger Rune. He beats Djokovic in Rome. They don't really talk about what happens after that. We get, Alcaraz winning Wimbledon, but nothing really in the build up to that or his hard court summer stretch. Sunshine swing stretch, even though he obviously had a very good Indian Wells. They're kind of jumping around and just picking their moment and saying, hey, this is enough. This is really all you need to know. We don't need to follow up with here's how this result finished. Here's just more broadly, it's a rising result. And I like it. I think it's effective. What do you think?
Yeah, no, it's a good point. It's very incomplete from a tennis standpoint. They are not closing the bow on really any of these tournaments for the main part. If you watch Breakpoint, right, you don't know who won Indian Wells, right? You do know who won the Australian Open, but that's about it so far.
On the women's side, not on the. Oh, I guess you saw Novak at the
trophy
too.
ceremony.
You're right. Yeah.
But you're right. It's like honestly, it's a totally different show this season.
Yeah,
because of that.
You're so right.
They are this individually. They are saying, what is the story here that we want to tell? And they're not doing anything that doesn't support telling that story. Yeah, I think it's working. I think I like it. Let's finish the season. I'm curious to see people's reactions. I have read a negative comment about that very thing where, somebody was frustrated that they feel like it's not really giving you the big picture of what's happening in the tennis. But I think for the most part, my gut right now is that it's for the better.
Yeah, I would agree with that assessment. Let's finish the season.
Yeah.
But they're telling you they're not compromising any story by leaving out a detail. Of course, tennis fans would like more. If you want more, listen to the mini break. Listen to Monday Match Analysis. I think this is doing a great job of telling the stories in a very entertaining way. The other things I would go to just quickly, France is talking about the weight of trying to accomplish now what he is post US Open, of being that role model and again representing African Americans within a predominantly white sport. Just to hear him open up about that, the weight of those expectations, what that's meant to him. Certainly you get, again, some insight into, okay, now you've broken through. What's the next step? How difficult it is to make that next step when people like Steph Curry are telling you to do better. That's sick. But it's also like, yo, man, wait, Steph just told me I need to step up. Like, am I not stepping up? What's going on? And so that was a fascinating detail as well. And then my last quote, maybe my favorite insight. And again, these guys have known each other forever. This kind of speaks to the theme, friend or foe. But when Francis is told, hey, you're going to do a press conference with Fritz, and he's like, oh, Fritz is going to be so serious. He's like, Fritz, loosen up, bro. And he just kind of says that offhand. Like, that was funny. That's two people who know each other extraordinarily well, where you're like, hey, again, I'm sure if someone tells me, oh, you're working with Gill, or someone tells you, oh, you're working with Gruskin, of course, we would both be happy about that. But we also make a joke because that's what we do.
100%. And Taylor knew how to come back, and he was like, well, that's cool, but nobody can understand Francis. So what does it matter? Yeah, I mean, somebody tells me, oh, you're going to go on with Gruskin. I'm going to go, oh, let me clear out 5 hours of my schedule. We know what to do. I am waiting, and thank you for also bringing up the extra purpose that Francis feels. He feels he represents his community. He represents, as you said, people of color in the United States, and wants more, young Black children playing tennis because of him. Nothing makes him feel better than that. Nothing will fulfill him as a human being more than that. And he has been saying that for years. That is an extra weight. That is an added pressure. And I think that's tough for him to deal with. I think it motivates him. I also think sometimes it's a lot for him. Other than that, though, I would love to hear less about pressure in Breakpoint as a whole. That's a topic for another day. But I am getting a little bit tired of everything being framed as, okay, now you're having success. Now there's more pressure. It's a big part of tennis. I agree with it. Nerves, pressure, expectation. It's huge. But I need a little more diversity when it comes to how we're explaining and describing the challenges that a tennis player faces.
This is not a disagreement. This is just an addition to what you are saying. It's all been reflective of the fact that in every player's mind, they are the center of the tennis universe, that they are the center of the world, that now all the expectations and all the limelight is focused upon them. And by the way, it's an individual sport. When you read an article about you there, or someone is talking about you on the podcast, they are indeed talking directly about you, analyzing you specifically. That's all this tells me is you have to be self-centered. You have to be self-driven, all the self-related adjectives, again, to succeed in this sport. And that just seems to be the narrative we get from all of these players. It just feels like all the limelight is now on me. All the spotlight is now on me. And it's not that that is or isn't true. It's just like, well, it's an individual sport. So, of course, you're only as good as you are, my friend. Hold on. Let me get my my Annika Runa cigarette as I start to get philosophical here. But it's just like that's just the truth is you kind of realize, oh, you do all live in your own universes and you almost have to.
Yeah, it is a lot of pressure. I'm just saying I would love, for example, I'm just going to think of something. I would love, let's say Alexander Bublik is the focus. And his issue is like, yeah, I hate doing fitness. And then I get really tired in the matches. Like, I can't stand working out. I don't want to run. I like tennis, but I don't want to do fitness. And yeah, that's my challenge. I would just like to hear, I'm not saying that's even true about Bublik, something that's not like, oh, I got to handle the pressure. Oh, the pressure. Like, I just hear pressure for everybody. And I want to find other things. That's all. All right.
I have no pushback with that. I think that's complete. It'd be nice if someone said, you know what? If Frances was like, you know what? My forehand technique kind of breaks down against power. I'm working on it. I promise. That would be interesting. And we're getting closer to that as these players kind of analyze one another. We're getting closer to it, but you're right. We didn't say this in the Runa episode, but Nick Kyrgios saying, Holger's kind of had some inconsistency in his team around him. And once he gets some steadiness there, things are going to really fall into place. And I was like, really, Nick? Like, that's what you think? You need a constant and steady team around you, huh? It's just like, that is fascinating analysis from you of all people.
No. He walks the walk there. He has the same people around. He doesn't have a coach.
Well, that's what I'm saying, I guess, it was as it relates to the coach. It's like, so your solution has just been to have no one. You're like, that's what works for you, which again, it works for him. I'm not trying to knock it. I'm just saying it was fascinating. Like, I wanted to stop the episode there and be like, hold on, producer, you're not going to ask him a follow-up? Like, are we not going to get something here and at least give it to us in the post-tape credits? But yeah, like, again, as it relates more broadly, like, all of these players are starting to mature. It's been fascinating to see them display how these players, the perspective they view themselves, the lens within how they view themselves.
This has been season 2, episode 3, Friend or Foe, the Breakpoint recap show on Gill Gross YouTube and the Crack Racquets podcast network.